All right, everybody, we are back again, and we are again one day closer to the college football playoff. And today we are getting more of a national perspective. We are talking with the guys from Always Talkin' Ball, Tyler Noe and Lance Barton. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great, Mike. We're finally just a couple of days away from this game that we've all obviously been breaking down and diagnosing from every little detail you could imagine for this last week. We're finally about to kick it off here in a couple of days, but man, I'm fired up to watch this one. This is about as good as it gets with these two blue blood programs meeting for the national championship.
Yep, that's kind of what my thought has been. So let's just dive right into it. A lot of people, I've actually heard a lot of people more on the Ohio State side, but a few on the Notre Dame side kind of equate this with Ohio State Miami in terms of the offense that Notre Dame brings to the table. If you remember back in that game, Ohio State kind of had that ground-based offense. Craig Krenzel was not great, but was sufficient enough to make the plays. And they had Maurice Claret and the big tight ends and all that. Um, is this an Irish offense that if you think can get things to manageable, second and short, third and short, that they can give Ohio State problems, or what do you think the Notre Dame offense has to do to stay in this game?
Yeah, I think that's actually a great comparison. I mean, if you look at that game and kind of how Miami was built really similar to Ohio State. And if you kind of look at just the history of college football, at least in the last 25, 30 years, Ohio State this year on offense seems like they're more like SEC style, like how they've been in the past. And obviously Notre Dame is your classic, just Midwest football program, playing in the cold, all that stuff. And I think that, yeah, I mean, that's the whole key for Notre Dame is getting yourself into manageable second and third downs. If they get behind the chains against this Ohio State defense, it's going to be tough. I mean, Lance highlighted in our show how many tackles for loss and how many sacks that Ohio State's just put up in these three games. I mean,
28 tackles for a loss and 16 sacks in the three college football playoff games so far for Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, JTT and Jack Sawyer have nearly doubled their production just in these three games from what they did over the first 12 games. And it's a tough place to be if you're in third and long and against this defense because they've got guys, obviously, who can rush the passer, and they've got guys in the back end who can cover those receivers, and they're not going to give you a lot of time to throw to get those, third and 12. So the Irish offense has to live in the short yardage, 3rd and 5 or less, because Riley Leonard excels at the intermediate throws with Jordan Faison over the middle. And obviously, they can throw it out the backfield to Jeremiah Love or Aeneas Williams. So it's a good comparison, but it's ultimately going to be hard for the Irish offense to do anything against the defense, which it's been that way for everybody who's played them, except for Oregon in the first game.
Yeah, and obviously, too, Mike, in that fourth quarter against Penn State, Riley Leonard and Notre Dame opened up the offense a little more and was able to have some success in the passing game in that fourth quarter. But, I mean, it's obvious that Notre Dame wants to run the football. They want to obviously use Riley Leonard in the run game, get that extra hat in the run game like that. And if you're living in, third and short and your medium second and shorts and you're staying a little bit on schedule, that's obviously where Notre Dame wants to live, because if they get in third and long and you're turning loose this pass rush that Ohio State's been turning loose in this college football playoff, and you allow Jim Knowles to possibly, he hasn't had to use a ton of blitzes so far in this playoff, but if you give him the opportunity to, do some exotic type blitzes against this Notre Dame team that's got a little offensive line that's a little banged up, that's going to be tough for Notre Dame to be able to overcome that.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And if you move over to Ohio State, they have had obviously the first two games against Tennessee and Oregon. They got out to a lightning quick start, and it was over before it started. Against Texas, they scored on their first drive, then got bogged down with some penalties that killed some things, but they still had the explosive screen pass to Travion Henderson that really kind of tipped the balance a little bit. I think that that put Texas a little bit back on its heels. And then, of course, the explosive play on defense by Jack Sawyer at the end of the game. Does Ohio State seem a little more equipped to win different ways? If you take their explosiveness away, they can win kind of grinding it out. Or if you take away their running game, they can win with the explosiveness.
Yeah, I believe that's the case, Mike. The fact that obviously the embarrassment of riches at the skill position for Ohio State. I know that, Jeremiah Smith gets a ton of publicity, and obviously so, for the way he played in those first 2 games and just his size and speed and just overall ability at the receiver position. But Igbuka and Tate are obviously incredible receivers as well. G. Scott at the tight end positions had a really good, can catch the ball out of the backfield as well, make some plays at the tight end position. But to have 2 just legit running backs like they've got. I know Ohio State's offensive line is a little bit more of a makeshift offensive line, and Chip Kelly's been able to do a good job of kind of masking that in this playoff so far, for the most part. But they do have the ability. Like Penn State had a lot of success in that first half running the football against Notre Dame, and more specifically, they had a lot of success of getting to the edge against that Notre Dame defense. And obviously with Henderson and Judkins, like the speed and the explosiveness that they have, that's something that's keeping me up at night if I'm Al Golden for Notre Dame. There's a lot of things that's keeping me up at night for this Ohio State offense, but the ability of the explosive run plays for Henderson and Judkins, we were talking about it on our show, Mike, that in Ohio State will hit you with like a 2-yard run, 3-yard run. It's kind of like a ho-hum. It doesn't seem like they're getting much done in the run game. Then all of a sudden there's a little bit of a crease and Henderson's 40 yards down the field before you know it. Mm-hmm. Or Judkins is all of a sudden busted a 20-yard run up the middle or something. That's what you've got to worry about if you're Notre Dame. You have to limit that because explosive plays will kill you as a defense.
Yeah, and if you look at Notre Dame's defense, obviously one of the best defenses in the country, but where they have been susceptible a little bit is to explosive plays. And most notably in that USC game, the last game of the regular season, where obviously, USC's playing catch up. They're trying to keep up with Notre Dame scoring, and they never had a lead in that game, but they were always, they were throwing the ball in the second half to try to get going, which is where they got a lot of those yards. But, they are liable to the explosiveness. But where Notre Dame kind of comes into play is they allow some of those explosive plays, and then bam, it's one play and Christian Gray has an interception or Xavier Watts has an interception. And so kind of, I guess you can equate that to kind of like defensive explosiveness is like kind of like a bend, don't break. And so you just gotta pay attention. All it takes is just one mistake for Howard to make under pressure, and Notre Dame's got the ball back.
Right. And Penn State averaged, I think, close to 4.9 yards per carry. And they were kind of eating them up on outside zone. And that's what Ohio State likes running. But then Drew Aller throws that interception and Notre Dame leads the country in takeaways. So something's got to give. So speaking of Notre Dame's defense, we've been hearing about this matchup that Notre Dame is not going to change what they are. Al Golden's going to bring the heat like he normally does. They're going to have Leonard Moore and Christian Gray playing man, and you're going to have Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate on the outside, Igbuka in the slot. I tend to think that they're not going to be as exclusively man as they say they are, because Texas kind of gave a little bit of a blueprint with the bubble up deep and just giving up stuff underneath. But that's allowed Tate and Igbuka to feast when teams have taken away Jeremiah Smith. So how do you defend these OSU receivers? Do you think that Notre Dame is going to say, you know what, challenge us in man? Or do you think you're going to see a little more of a zone or different coverages on the back end?
Yeah, I think you're right. You watch Texas and Michigan and kind of in that Nebraska game too. They kind of all three gave the blueprint. And Notre Dame, you're right. Notre Dame's going to play man. That's what Al Golden does. He's going to blitz. He's going to blitz a ton. These two teams just played 16 months ago, right? And they did just fine playing man. Obviously, Marvin Harrison Jr. got a little banged up in that game. Kyle McCord, is throwing the rock instead of Will Howard. But that's what Al Golden does. He plays man. Now, funnily enough, in that game, if you remember on that 3rd and 19, he dropped back into a zone, and that allowed Igbuka to find that hole and to get down to the 3-yard line. And that's probably got to be sticking in the back of his mind, like, okay, yeah, we got to be who we are. We got to play man. Now, I don't think they may throw in a little bit of a zone look, but I think they're going to shadow either Schuler or Watts over the top of Smith, and then they're going to trust that their corners, either Leonard Moore, Christian Gray, or their nickel Jordan Clark, is going to be able to at least contain Igbuka and Tate as much as they can, and they're going to hope that they keep everything in front of them, And Ohio State, they're gonna say there's no way they can sustain 12 to 14 play drives without having a play behind the chains, having a penalty like they kind of were susceptible to in that Texas game. That's going to be Notre Dame's game plan on the defense, to stretch out the clock, to keep it a low scoring affair, and obviously that plays right into Notre Dame's hands.
Yeah, and Mike, I would agree with that. Well said, Tyler. I think that Notre Dame needs to try to do their best, like Texas did, to try to keep everything in front of them. And there'll be some times that it might be, if you're pulling for Notre Dame in this game, that it might like drive you crazy because, Egbuka's sitting there catching the ball like 5 or 6 yards down the field, and there's not a navy blue jersey, not a gold helmet hardly in the screen, and they're just trying to keep everything in front of them and make Ohio State have longer, sustained drives, try to make them be patient. Because I think you can, as an offense, get a little addicted to, because why not? Well, you get a little addicted to the explosive play. And you saw that in that second half, early in the third quarter, they tried to force the ball to Jeremiah Smith, and they ended up throwing an interception on the play. That was really the only time that they hardcore forced it to him. But if you're Notre Dame, you're going to dance with the one that brung you. Like, they're going to run man. They're going to try. I think they're going to try their best to run man. I think they believe in their corners. Marcus Freeman puts a ton of belief in these players. I don't know what kind of message that you'd be sending to this secondary that's an elite secondary if you come out and tell them, hey, guys, we're going to play zone. That basically tells them that they don't believe that they can cover Jeremiah Smith and Egbuka. And so I think they're going to try to play man early on. But also, if you're Ohio State in that matchup, you obviously believe in Egbuka and Tate and Smith and your guys to go win that matchup. That's why, like I talked about it on our show, Mike. I know everybody, of course, is going to talk about line of scrimmage play, and rightfully so. That's obviously where the games are won in almost every single matchup between two opponents like this. But the matchup between these Ohio State receivers and this Notre Dame secondary is going to be juicy. And I can't wait to watch, because they're both elite units. And I think that's where this game could possibly be won. Because if Notre Dame can somehow hold up in that matchup, I think that they believe that their defensive line can hold up against Ohio State's offensive line. So I think that's a key for Notre Dame.
Right. I do think the one thing that helped Ohio State was that fourth quarter drive where they took the lead, 7 minutes and 45 seconds. It probably would have been shorter if Will Howard doesn't trip over his own feet.
Yep.
But that added another couple of minutes, and they showed 13 plays. They can march the ball down the field. And even though I think they'd like to be explosive, like you said, I think that maybe showed them, hey, you know what? If we don't kick ourselves in the butt with penalties, we can do this and we can grind it out. So I do think that there was a silver lining in that fourth quarter drive that allowed them to maybe give themselves a little bit of confidence. Hey, if they do take our explosiveness away, we can kind of do this.
Quick comment on that drive. Chip Kelly and Ryan Day were absolutely in their bag on that drive. The way they mixed it up, and the tight end, the back out of the backfield, receiver Will Howard in the run game, they mixed it up so well on that drive. And I agree with you. That is something to look for in this game, of them mixing it up like that.
Yeah. Now you talked about Notre Dame being able to maybe slow down a little bit of what Ohio State wants to do. But on the other side, with Riley Leonard being such a threat in the RPO game, not so much JTT and Sawyer, but Tyleik Williams and Ty Hamilton would really have the spotlight on them, and they may need to dictate terms. And against a Notre Dame offensive line that, as you pointed out, has some guys banged up, they may be able to eat. What do you think that the chances are that those two guys, Tyleik and Ty Hamilton, make their presence felt in this one?
Well, Mike, the biggest weakness, I think, for really any quarterback, I mean, you even look in the NFL days with Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, and like all your big-time quarterbacks tell you that the number one thing that'll wreck a game plan on offense and it'll make a quarterback uncomfortable is that pressure that's right in their face. Mm-hmm. It's coming through the A gaps, and it's coming because, I mean, you think about it, you drop back, or if you're in shotgun, that's right in your face, and it makes you uncomfortable. I don't care how big of a dual threat you are or not. If they're able to get pressure up the middle like that with those two dogs that you just talked about, which that whole defensive line, the amount of money they've made in this playoff has been incredible. Like, they all came back to want to win a national championship, and they all came back to want to, boost their draft stock a little bit. the interior of that like you said, Sawyer and JTT are getting all the publicity, but that interior of that defensive line has also played extremely well in this CFP. And if they're able to get pressure up the middle, then Notre Dame's offense, it's just odd. They're going to have a lot of trouble to be able to move the ball at all.
Yeah, we've seen it with Riley Leonard throughout the season. His first instinct when his first read's not there, or his first pressure, he's going to run. That's just who he is. And he got magnified when Steve Angeli came in for that last drive of the first half. And he kind of stood in the pocket a little more, took some hits, but he made some throws. So, but Leonard's just going to run. I mean, that's who he is. So, again, if you can get pressure right in his face, he's going to have to scramble right, scramble left, throw on the run. That is a cause for more mistakes. That's just the name of the game in football. I mean, with anybody, especially even with someone, as mobile as Leonard is, you put pressure on him right up the middle. You kind of get in his vision, get in his lanes. He's bound to make more mistakes.
Yeah, I tend to think that if those guys can't be neutralized, then that is one aspect of the Notre Dame offense that is going to really be hindered, and that'll limit them even more because Jeremiah Love, as great as he is, I don't think can do it by himself. So I guess last thing, there's always an X factor in a game. Ohio State's offensive line has been up and down, played great against Tennessee, wasn't as good against Oregon, was very good against Texas, especially late. They could be an X factor. Notre Dame's special teams, with the way that they scored just before half, they've blocked kicks. They've been able to win the field position battle, and getting Mitch Jeter back gives them, I think, a little bit more confidence in their field goal game if they need to settle for that. What do you guys think might be the X factor in this game that could tip it one way or the other?
Yeah, for Notre Dame, I mean, you said it. It's got to be special teams. Someone threw out on X yesterday. Wouldn't be surprised to see, Notre Dame kind of maybe attempt either pooch kick or an onside surprise onside at some point, right? But they've got to try to generate either an extra possession somehow on special teams. Obviously, having Ohio State drive and come up with no points, like either a missed field goal or a blocked field goal or something, that's great. But they got to do something on special teams. They got to continue what they've been doing all year with the turnovers. But I think if it's a clean game and there's not a lot, on special teams being decided, no turnovers, few penalties, it's just a really narrow path for Notre Dame.
Yeah, and as far as an X factor for Notre Dame, Mike, I just think that, again, that I personally think that Notre Dame's defensive front is going to be able to hold up enough to be able to keep the Ohio State run game in check. Again, you always are, worried about the explosive run, but overall, I think they're going to be able to hold up. They've got to be able to win those matchups on the outside. So the Notre Dame corners, they've got to be able to hold their own and hold up against those freak weapons for Ohio State on the perimeter. And so we went all this time talking about, the line of scrimmage and the weapons on the outside and stuff. G. Scott, in the tight end, that could be something, because Notre Dame's going to be trying so hard and focusing so much on stopping those receivers that there could be some stuff open in the middle of the field. And, Ohio State did a good job. When Texas was trying to keep everything in front of them. And Ohio State did a good job of taking what the defense was giving them. And there could be a chance that the tight end play in this game that could be open in the middle of the field, and they could be giving them, and Ohio State takes that, and they could have a lot more catches and a lot more yards in this game.
And that's actually one aspect. G. Scott had a catch on that drive where it looked like it was going to be 4th and 5. He leaned forward and got a couple more yards, made it 4th and 2, and it was a lot easier. And then in the Rose Bowl, first play of the game, off the widescreen look, they had not shown that all year. And they throw that pass to him, and he gets 30 yards on the first play of the game, and it was kind of in motion. So I think that's actually a pretty good pick, because they have been utilizing the tight after not doing it much during the season. They've really incorporated them, I think, into the game plan a lot more. So I guess last thing now, everyone's anxious for this game. We got 2 blue bloods, 2 of the biggest brands in college football, that I think that this kind of when the bracket was announced, I think a lot of people felt that if Ohio State was right mentally, that they were probably the most talented team in here. And Notre Dame had a fairly easy draw with Indiana. And then Playing Penn State obviously was going to be tough, but they were kind of similar teams, and Notre Dame just needed to basically do what they did. So we've gotten to this. So knowing what you know and kind of the way you've examined things, how do you think this game plays out, and what is the final outcome?
Yeah, I for everybody new listening to the show, I grew up a Notre Dame fan, so this is going to be a heart over head pick. But the more and more we came on, a week ago, kind of gave our early look at the game, and it's no secret it's a more narrow path for Notre Dame to win. But the more and more this week goes on, the more and more belief starts to creep into my mind. And I think that, as Lance said, I mean, Notre Dame's just got too much about them to get blown out. I mean, could it happen? Could you see it happening? Yes. Nothing would shock me in this game. Actually, it's kind of one of the weird things about this game is like, it wouldn't shock me if Ohio State blew them out. It wouldn't shock me if Notre Dame won. I mean, nothing would really surprise me. I just think that Notre Dame, they find a way to get it done. I think they find a way, again, that special teams with under a minute to go. I think it's going to be on Mitch Jeter's leg again, and I think he's going to put it through. I think they're going to win 24-23.
And yeah, to Tyler's point, like Notre Dame's path, it obviously is a lot more narrow. They need to, like, you've heard a lot of shows this week talk about like dragging teams into the deep end of the water with them and making them play their style. Notre Dame obviously is going to have to do that to win this game. And, I've picked against Notre Dame like twice this year, and Tyler loves to call me out on it. I picked against them against Georgia, picked against them against Texas A&M earlier this year. But in this matchup, Notre Dame's injuries, everybody knows about how many injuries that they have. Going up against this much talent for Ohio State, just across the board, like they're elite at every level on their defense. And they've got playmakers everywhere on their offense. I think that Notre Dame will be able to ugly it up a little bit and make Ohio State play their game a little bit. But again, Ohio State also is very physical at the line of scrimmage. And I just don't know how Notre Dame's going to be able to muster it up enough on offense to be able to score enough points here to be able to win this one. I've got a lower scoring game. I've got the Buckeyes winning 24-13. That's a prediction I threw out on our show, and I'm still sticking with it. I think Ohio State wins this game 24-13.
That's very, very interesting. So I do think that when the point spread came out, it struck me as a little bit high. My power ratings have them, I think, separated by 2 points. Most of them, I think the highest was like 4.5. So I know that they're looking at injuries. Anthony Knapp not playing, although they are getting Charles Jagusa back, and he was the start at the beginning of the year. So it's not the worst time in the world for Knapp to go out. But I do think that you're right with the injuries when they're happening. I think it could kind of be a problem, because if there was maybe 2 weeks between this game, like the Super Bowl, maybe you'd be able to do something about it. But this is fairly quick. So I'm going to give my pick on the show I'm going to do on Monday. But I tend to be somewhere in between you guys. I think Ohio State wins, but I don't think they're going to cover. So I can see a lot of the elements that both of you have talked about coming into play. So thanks a lot for coming on and chopping it up. If folks want to find you guys on social media, where can they go?
Mike, you can find us we're on X, we're on TikTok, we're on Instagram. We throw out a tons of reels on TikTok and Instagram, but we're on X at Always Talk Ball, and on Instagram and TikTok we're at Always Talkin Ball, TALKIN, little southern flavor in that.
Right.
And we're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. You can find us on there, Always Talking Ball. But Mike, we always appreciate you having us on, man. We talked to you before the season started. We love catching your stuff that you throw on X, a lot of the, the articles that you write and a lot of the insight that you share. You do a wonderful job, and we definitely have enjoyed getting to know you more and becoming like podcast and like college football friends here with you, man. We appreciate you having us on.
Well, thanks a lot. And folks, you want to check out their pod, because there's always something informative, often something funny, maybe not always intentionally, but these guys have some humor in their shows too. And they actually take a lot of angles that maybe your standard podcast doesn't take. So check them out as well. And if you like this show, hit the subscribe button and hit the like button. And guys, let's hope that we get a great game on Monday, and we will talk to you down the road.
Definitely appreciate it, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.